Today on A Current Affair, the explosive words of Jeffrey Dahmer's father in a world-exclusive interview with A Current Affair's Steve Dunleavy.
Truthfully, he said, Dad, I never really was involved with Satanism. I guess that was his first act of violence, to pour oil and kill the tadpole. I'm proud of you, Jeff. You really did get right with God.
My son, Jeffrey Dahmer. A Current Affair also gets reactions from mothers of Dahmer's victims.
It's sad. And I feel sorry for his family, his mother and father.
And we speak to the minister who baptized him in jail.
He lived his life, toward the end anyway, serving God as best as he could.
Also today, animal lovers say it's the most brutal horse race in the world. Native Americans believe it's part of their heritage. The battle over the Derby of Death. Plus, find out how men react when a woman goes up to them and says, "Let's spend the night together." This is A Current Affair with Penny Daniels.
Hello and welcome. We'll take you on the scene for what some call a stampede of death in just a moment. But first, exclusive to A Current Affair, Jeffrey Dahmer's father speaks out. What does Lionel Dahmer think about the eye for an eye philosophy that may have ended his son's life? What insight can he give to his son's brutality? Steve Dunleavy has the interview you won't see anywhere else.
I would like Jeff to be remembered, number one, for finally, at least, being totally truthful and providing information so that all 17 of the victims' families would know the fate of their loved ones.
Lionel Dahmer is talking about his son, the monster of Milwaukee.
Mr. Dahmer, right across the country, newspapers with headlines, "Death of a Monster, Justice has finally been served." Your reaction?
My feelings are mixed. I can understand what they're saying, what they mean, I think, when they say monster. And yet, on the other hand, no one is born a monster. And he was not a monster. What he did was monstrous.
Did Jeffrey Dahmer ever offer an explanation for those terrible deeds?
Yeah, he has said several times in the past that it was a compulsion that was just too strong. He just felt powerless. He didn't feel like he had much control over his life. And he had these obsessions, these compulsions, these necrophilic compulsions.
Did you ever ask him, "Son, did you commit cannibalism?"
I never asked him if he committed cannibalism. And whenever we would even hint at some of these details of the crimes, you could see a cloud come over his countenance, his face. His eyes would look different. And if you stayed too long with that, it just wasn't, it wasn't good for either of our mental health.
And today, as a father mourns for the son who mutilated, murdered, and even cannibalized 17 young men and boys, he struggles with a question. Why? Why?
I went through a period of about a year and a half or two trying to decide what might be a significant factor, a causal agent. Went through the whole gamut, you know, divorce, medication, environment, genetics, and what I ended up with was quite a bit of questions, but no firm answers.
But even his father remembers a cruel streak in young Jeffrey. It surfaced when a teacher gave away some tadpoles Jeff had given her.
I guess that was his first act of violence, to pour oil and kill the tadpoles, because he was angry, I guess, that the teacher had given it back to one of his playmates.
And then there was the box his son refused to open.
And I insisted that Jeff open the box, and he did want to. He got a little bit belligerent and angry, and a little later I learned at the trial what was in there.
And?
The human head. It's just hard to imagine Jeff doing those things. It really is.
Just as hard to imagine for this God-fearing man is the fact that his son reportedly worshipped the devil.
He said, Dad, I never really was involved with Satanism. It was just more or less dabbling into it, just looking into it superficially. And I tend to believe him.
And incredibly, the father of this most hated of all serial killers also believes his son will spend eternity in heaven.
He's been baptized into Christ. I feel that he really is in a saved condition.
But for now, Jeffrey Dahmer's father is still trying to grasp the reality that his son is no longer on this earth.
We prayed together last night for Jeff and for us and for everyone involved, but especially for Jeff, for God to take him in his bosom.
If you could talk to Jeffrey, as I'm sure in your own personal way you do, what are you saying to Jeffrey tonight?
I say the same thing that I've told him recently many times, that I'm proud of you, Jeff. After all of the horrible things that you've done, and we've all gone through, you have made the move that's going to last for an eternity. That's a very long time. I'm proud of you, Jeff.
And we will have much more from Jeffrey Dahmer's father. His exclusive conversation with Steve Dunleavy continues tomorrow. On the other side of this brutal murder are the crimes Jeffrey Dahmer himself committed and the grisly legacy he left behind for his victims' families. Now those family members react to his prison murder, and I think you'll be very surprised by what they have to say.
If he truly found God, God will forgive him. I forgave him from day one. I never hated him or his family. I hated what he done to all the young men.
I feel, well, if he had talked to God, and so I think that he would forgive him. Only him and God knows.
They are the mothers of two of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, and in the wake of Dahmer's death, they are surprisingly forgiving to the man who killed their sons and to his father.
Now they know what we have went through. They'll have to go through the same thing, So now they know. And yet my heart goes out to any mother that loses a child.
I don't believe in taking a life for a life. That is not going to bring anything back. It won't do anything. That's just more pain.
Had Dahmer lived, was there any hope for change or rehabilitation for somebody like him? As Jeffrey Dahmer's father mentioned, his son had apparently found religion in prison and was recently baptized. Now David Lee Miller talks to the Reverend Roy Ratcliffe, the man who baptized Dahmer, and gets his insight into the serial killer's diabolical soul.
Did Jeffrey Dahmer have any remorse for the crimes he committed when he went to his death? Oh, yes, he had a whole lot of remorse. In fact, I think he lived with remorse for the rest of his life. He felt extremely guilty for what he'd done. He felt very badly about those things, but he had a sense of frustration, too, because there was nothing more that he could do about it. I mean, other than give his life up, which was not something the state would do. He simply could not do anything else.
What do you say to people who believe Jeffrey Dahmer wanted to die and he was too weak to commit suicide himself, and he simply allowed himself to be exposed to those who would kill him?
I don't know. That may be true. I do know that he did feel he ought to have been put to death. I do know that he did not have the courage to do it himself, as far as suicide goes, because we talked about that.
What was your last meeting like with Jeffrey Dahmer?
I think in a very real sense he was at peace in his own heart as far as his relationship with God is concerned. His relationship with other people, of course, is another matter. I don't know what was going through his mind when he was being attacked. But I think as far as meeting his maker is concerned, I think he was very well prepared.
According to Reverend Ratcliffe, funeral arrangements for Jeffrey Dahmer are still being worked out. but if the family requests, he would be willing to officiate at the ceremony. Meanwhile, preliminary autopsy results were released today. Jeffrey Dahmer, they say, died from multiple skull fractures and brain trauma. The suspect, Christopher Scarver, who was on the same cleaning detail as Dahmer, was serving a life sentence for an execution-style slaying during a robbery in 1992. He is now in isolation at the very prison where Jeffrey Dahmer was killed. Penny?
Thanks, David. And we'll have a lot more on Jeffrey Dahmer, including further insight from his dad tomorrow. Now, find out how men react to the question they claim they would love to hear from a stranger.
Wouldn't you prefer going back to your place and making love to me?
And prepare yourself for the brutal events that's sparking controversy and killing innocent animals next.
They won't stop us. We'll run it anywhere, anyway.